If ever there was a slow burn handheld, then the 3DS is surely it. From disappointing early sales to being recognised as an incredible bit of kit in recent years, Nintendo's 3D delight is now getting the respect it deserved all along. Let us put some respect on the library of this wonder from the third dimension by checking out the best Nintendo 3DS games of all time. Be sure to drop your favourite 3DS game down below. There are few gameplay formulas as timeless and as recognisable as Breakout, or whatever other name you know it from. Essentially, one-player Pong, you control a paddle, breaking blocks with a ball until you win. Before Ball Pit revolutionised that formula, Siesta Fiesta had its own take, and also a really cool name. Essentially, a side-scrolling platformer with Breakout-style gameplay, the game follows Siesta as absolutely nothing can rouse the lad from his slumber. Instead of controlling him directly, you manoeuvre the bed to bounce the sleepyhead through 8 distinct worlds, collecting power-ups, fighting pinata bosses, or trying alternative modes if you get bored. It's not revolutionary, but it is a pretty solid example of the 3DS's downloadable library and just a whole bunch of fun. Gunman Clive tells you pretty much everything you need to know about it from the title alone. You play as a gunman called Clive. Enough said, time to lock in. A Western-themed action platformer which paid homage to the classics of the genre, the goal of Gunman Clive's 20 levels is to ultimately rescue the mayor's daughter from a group of banditos. Granted, it is a futuristic western, so there's Wild West-esque giant robots too. The game itself is fairly standard as you blast through levels collecting power-ups and occasionally fighting bosses. What made Gunman Clive a 3DS highlight though is the hand-drawn flipbook art style, giving the game a unique, lovely visual flair, and it also had a ludicrous asking price of just $2 on the eShop. You're probably about as sick of us talking about the Mario vs Donkey Kong series as we are talking about it. 3 Nintendo handheld ranking lists in a row will do that to you. Fortunately for us, and you watching, the Mario vs Donkey Kong games have different gameplay styles, so Mario and Donkey Kong Minis on the Move has plenty of key differences from its predecessors. Essentially Pipe Mania, but with toy plumbers, players stick down blocks on a grid that force the mini toys to move in a specific direction. You need to use this ability to guide the minis to the goal, collecting coins along the way to unlock new level and goodies. It's not the kind of game that anyone will be screaming from the rooftops about, but there is fun to be had in them there toy factories. Aside from karting and maybe tennis, golf seems to be Mario's most consistent hobby. Well, consistency might not be the most accurate description, considering there hadn't been a Mario Golf game for 10 years before the release of the 3DS's Mario Golf World Tour. Granted, the formula here is mostly the same as previous entries, but when you've got a winner, you've got a winner. Enough said. Mario Golf World Tour sees Mario and the gang gathering around the clubhouse once again for a round of 18 holes, with all the usual modes of play and the characters you'd expect. There's also the Castle Club mode, the continuation of the series' story mode, and a host of DLC you can't get anymore. Well, officially. Matey. There aren't many beloved Wii U games that we're still waiting for a Switch port on, but Yoshi's Woolly World is one of those games. That didn't stop Nintendo from porting the game to the 3DS in the form of Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World though, which fortunately for any traumatized Itchy and Scratchy fans doesn't include a talking dog. He had to go. His planet needed him. Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World is a straight port of the Wii U release, albeit with some concessions to account for the lesser power of the 3DS. That being said, this version allows players to create their own personal Yoshi patterns in the Craft Yoshi editor. You give people a game based on craft supplies, you should really let them make something with it, and you can make some fun out of this game too. The closure of the 3DS eShop unfortunately meant that a bunch of exclusive games became unavailable to own via legitimate means. Sure, we have the 7 Cs, but some of the best 3DS games deserve a chance to shine properly, not just on emulation forums. That includes games like Crashmo, also known as Fall Blocks in Europe. Crashmo, the sequel to Pushmo, follows a character called Mallow as he pushes blocks to create paths and rescue stranded creatures. While the first game only allowed for back and forth pushing and pulling, Crashmo allows players to move both Mallow and the puzzle elements freely in a 3D space, making the puzzles themselves more devious and engaging as a result. Is Professor Layton not taxing enough for you? Crashmo is calling. Anybody who's already watched our 50 best DS games video will probably wonder why we're double dipping with Radiant Historia here. For the most part, it is the same game, with players controlling a young warrior called Stock as he seeks to solve the mysterious desertification of the continent of Vancure, bouncing between timelines in order to figure out the best path forward. The 3DS release is technically a remake of that original release, complete with some character redesigns to reflect personalities. However, the main addition to the game is the introduction of a brand new plotline and characters tied to the source of the desertification, leading to a brand new ending. You want to play Radiant Historia? This is the best version of that. We just put it lower because we've already talked about it. The Harvest Moon / Story of Seasons series is considered to be one of the largest cozy game franchises going, but that doesn't mean there aren't some spin-offs. Consider, for one, Rune Factory, which takes the farming sim and relationships you expect from Story of Seasons, but with the addition of a fantasy world and some dungeon crawling elements. If you're wondering why Stardew has a 100+ floor mine, it's the Rune Factory inspiration. Rune Factory 4 offers all the common aspects you'd expect from Rune Factory, managing your crops and forging bonds while crafting weapons to go out into the world. The game sees you defending your town Selphia from various threats, with plenty of characters to recruit and smooch, making it a deep game that'll hold your attention on the 3DS. One of the most infamous blends of horror, adventure and visual novel in gaming, Corpse Party might feel like a more modern indie game, but its history actually dates back to an original 1996 release on the NEC PC 9801. All the versions you're seeing today, though, on modern platforms are actually the second game in the series, which originally released in Japan on PSP in 2010. Released as Corpse Party Blood-Covered Repeated Fear before being ported to multiple platforms like the 3DS as just Corpse Party, the game sees a group of Japanese high school students transported to a different dimension and forced to try and survive against a vengeful spirit. They're either benevolent or vengeful. There's nothing in the middle ever with these spirits. It's very spooky, but there's a reason why the game has stuck around for as long as it has. We do try to keep one game per franchise on these big old lists, which is hard when there's about 20 different kinds of Mario or wider Mushroom Kingdom games out there, but for anyone expecting a different Monster Hunter game on this list, do not worry. We know that Stories is completely separate in genre and storyline and deserves to be mentioned separately. Unlike regular Monster Hunter, Stories follows the legend of the Riders, who are people who can form bonds with the monsters and ride them into battle. You control a fledgling rider who sets out into the world to find the cause of the Black Blight, an affliction bringing ruin to monsters and plant life alike. With turn-based rock, paper, scissors combat and some Pokemon-esque monster collection, Stories is a pretty underappreciated RPG on the 3DS. If you want proof that the release of the Nintendo Switch didn't immediately murder the 3DS and its game releases, have a look at Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. Having launched on the Wii U as a spin-off from the bonus levels in Super Mario 3D World, Captain Toad would end up getting a 2018 port to both the Nintendo Switch and the 3DS, instantly shooting the game into all-time great 3DS territory. As a game, it is functionally the same as the Switch release, albeit with worse graphics. That said, the console 3D functionality and stylus camera control lends itself well to the diorama style level design that Captain Toad utilises. With plenty of levels to dive into, Captain Toad is both a 3DS classic and deserves a Switch 2 follow-up. Another 50 best games on a Nintendo handheld ranking video, and another Shantae mention. Not surprising really, as the Seafaring series offered some of the best Metroidvania action you could hope for on handheld platforms. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, specifically the third game in the series, carried on a lot of the series' traditions, blending amazing gameplay and comedic story to create something incredible. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse sees the former half-genie, having been stripped of her powers, teaming up with her rival Risky Boots in order to take on an even worse villain. With multiple dungeons to platform through and abilities to learn, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse is a 3DS classic that, fortunately, isn't locked to the system either. It feels like Team Ninja set themselves up to be the punchline of a joke, considering Dead or Alive is known for its heaving assets, yet they named the 3DS release Dimensions. What kind of dimensions are we talking about here, lads? The answer is still unclear, as there aren't any parallel Earth plot lines or anything, but if you're looking for lightning fast 3D fighting on the go, Dead or Alive Dimensions is it. Sort of a compilation of the first 4 games rather than a new game, DOA Dimensions brings all the characters including some previously locked boss characters together to have a big scrap. There's also a Metroid stage where Ridley appears as a hazard. Unfortunately it's based on Metroid Other M rather than Prime or Fusion. Oh, third dimension 3DS? Very clever. Ordinarily, we'd probably try to say that games about horse racing are the gaming equivalent of box office poison, but that was before Uma Musume Pretty Derby became the biggest trend in gaming for a while in 2025. Could you tell I'd never said those words out loud before? We shouldn't have been surprised though, as Pocket Card Jockey is another example of a game about horse racing that happened to be a bit of a phenomenon back in the day. Developed by Game Freak, who I guess wanted a break from the Pokemon content mines for 5 minutes, Pocket Card Jockey combines the card game Golf or One Foundation with horse racing and stable management. It sounds like a combination that shouldn't work until you boot the game up and suddenly 5 hours have passed. What else can card games improve? Filing taxes? Putting one of the best PS2 games of all time, or of anywhere really, on the lower end of this list might seem a bit harsh, but let's be honest here, Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater 3D is far from the best way to play this game these days. MGS3 is arguably the pinnacle of the stealth action genre, but it doesn't really feel amazing to play in the third dimension in 2026. This re-release once again follows naked Don't Call Me Solid Snake as he descends into the jungle to hunt his former mentor. All the action you'd expect is on show, only now you can use the 3DS to take 3D photos in-game instead of using a weird PSP peripheral, and all the keratin frogs have been replaced with Yoshi. You know what, I'm sold. It must be tough being a former Image Epoch developer, seeing the last game the company made before going bankrupt be considered among the best 3DS games ever made. It's probably how Clover Studio feels after watching God Hand become the PS2's cult hit. Anyway, for those looking for an RPG about witches that deserves a lot more love, Stellar Glow is your next big obsession. A turn-based RPG with time management and bond building elements, the game follows a young man by the name of Alto as he tries to stop a witch from crystallizing the human race. Apparently you can do that by uniting the other witches and having a big old sing-along. Expect cute vibes and whimsy throughout all 60 hours of its RPG fun. Yokai Watch might be one of Level 5's more recognisable franchises overseas, but for whatever reason, the series hasn't been able to establish much of a beachhead over here. Yokai Watch 3 in particular was a huge flop in the West, causing copies of the game in the wild to be ludicrously expensive. Unfortunately for those adverse to piracy and R4 chips, it's also pretty bloody good. Another monster collecting turn-based RPG, Yokai Watch 3 innovated on the formula by introducing a new tactics board offering a 3x3 grid that allowed players to strategize on their monster placement. Throw in the franchise's usual comedic story and writing, and you've got a light-hearted yet enjoyable 3DS whipper. Well, perhaps not as light as your wallet after buying it. The Persona series isn't exactly a stranger to spin-off releases, whether it's Persona 5 Tactica, Persona 4 Arena, or the various dancing games that came out a few years back. Do you remember them? We can go back even further, for examples though, with Persona Q Shadow of the Labyrinth bringing together 2 whole generations of Persona for a new adventure. Persona Q sees the cast of both Persona 3 and Persona 4 brought together to an alternate dimension by an unknown force, and together they need to traverse 4 labyrinths with the hopes of restoring the memories of 2 mysterious children, Zen and Rei. As a game, it's basically wearing the skin of another RPG series we'll talk about later on, but for Persona fans, this is a dream crossover. We've said it once, we've said it twice, and now we're saying it thrice. The Phoenix Wright games were huge for Nintendo's handheld platforms. The blend of visual novel storytelling and actual investigation work at the crime scene makes for incredibly compelling games, especially on the go, so it's no wonder that the series manages to still be very relevant today. For the 3DS's best, you want Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies, which sees you playing as 3 attorneys. You got Wright Apollo Justice and newcomer Athena Sykes as they defend a range of clients in what's called the Dark Age of Law. As a game, Dual Destinies is more of the Phoenix Wright Attorney that you love, only this time you get to defend an orca whale. Enough bloody said. Anyone with the misguided notion that the 3DS just didn't have a lot of games should be reminded that the 3DS eShop existed and flourished. If that isn't enough for them, the juggernaut SteamWorld series started out life on the DS, with Tower Defense launching on the DSi in 2010. When it came time for a follow-up though, Image and Form would create a behemoth in the making. Released in 2013, SteamWorld Dig first launched on the 3DS and arguably became the series' biggest hit. As the name implies, you do a lot of digging, specifically in a mine that the robot Rusty, that's you, has inherited from your Uncle Joe. How strange, I thought Joe was your mama. The mine changes every run, but with treasure to find and abilities to unlock, you'll be coming back for that sweet, sweet treasure time and time again. Another franchise that had the DS fanbase in a chokehold is the Professor Layton games. Puzzles and visual novels on a handheld? Who would have thought those things would work so well together? Turns out, literally everyone. Layton would continue life onto the 3DS, and even though the series might not have reached the same heady heights as its debut, games like Professor Layton and The Miracle Mask are still incredible. Like previous games in the series, players control Layton as he investigates a mystery, this time involving a villain supposedly using dark magic. Big changes include 3D environments, with players able to use the touchscreen and gyroscopic controls have full immersion during their investigation. It did make people look weird tilting their 3DS in public though, but once they saw that you're playing Professor Layton, they knew you were cool. Arguably the indie game with the most impact on the industry considering how early it was released, Cave Story proved to the world that you don't need a full development studio to create an amazing Metroidvania experience. What if you wanted to remake the game as a full 2.5D adventure though? Okay, maybe it's worth having Nicalis pitch in on that. Far from just a simple port of the original game, albeit with a new coat of 3D modelling, Cave Story 3D saw Nicalis and the game's original developer, Daisuke Pixel and Maya, joining together to create a new version of the game. There are some key differences, most notably a removed character in the form of Coley, but for Metroidvanias on the 3DS, this is a world beater. Many regard the 3DS standout Picross 3D Round 2 to still be the best in the series. Hopefully saying that doesn't make anyone too upset. Scalable degrees of difficulty are pretty essential to a game like Picross 3D Round 2, wrapped in a cozy core atmosphere that can't help but feel inviting, and it won't take you long to understand how this game wants you to go about solving its puzzles and obstacles. Where the game begins to suck up serious chunks of your free time is when you start getting into the more challenging portions of the game that really tickle your brain box. However, even at that point, you can still create an experience that's fun without making you too cross. Oh, I already did that one, didn't I? Smash the like button. Look, we're not going to sit here and tell you that Super Smash Bros. 4 3DS is the best version of Smash that's ever existed. We might have some wild opinions about PS2 classic The Bouncer, but we are not liars. Still, Nintendo essentially gave players a glimpse into the future with Ultimate, offering a handheld Smash experience that could keep up with the big boys. Besides, it was better than Brawl. We don't really need to explain the platform fighting gameplay of Smash at this point in time, but the 3DS release was the start of the series having gargantuan rosters. Throw in some bite-sized 3DS specific modes and you've got a brawler that's great for pick up and play sessions. Plus it introduced Little Mac, and we bloody love Punch-Out, don't we? Veterans of these handheld Nintendo rankings will be fully aware that these platforms were home to plenty of rhythm action games, with the DS home to games like Elite Beat Agents and Rhythm Heaven. The 3DS was no slouch though, as anyone who's a big fan of the music of the Final Fantasy series ate good with games like Theatre Rhythm, Final Fantasy Curtain Call, a name that's doing a lot of our word count goal heavy lifting. The second game in the series, Curtain Call, was as much an expansion of the ideas of the first game as it was a full second game, with everything players loved about the original, only with more of it. Over triple the amount of music tracks, more modes, and more options to accommodate for different styles of player, Curtain Call is simply the definitive theatre rhythm experience. Resident Evil games on handheld have been a bit of a mixed bag, and while Resident Evil Revelations might not hit the same dizzying heights that some of the earlier games in the series reached, it does offer bite-sized survival horror action that deserves respect. Plus more Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield content is absolutely fine by us. Set after the events of RE4, Revelations follows Jill and Chris as they try to take down a bioterror organisation across multiple episodes. While the bulk of the game is set on a cruise ship, the action spills out across various locations, with players fighting monsters across a single-player campaign and a two-player enabled raid mode. Co-op RE, also a mixed bag, but Revelations is a pretty good one too. You know how earlier in the video we talked about Persona Q being based on an already existing RPG? Well, that would be Etrian Odyssey, a series that started life on the Nintendo DS but would inevitably make the move to the 3DS too. Quite frankly, any of the Etrian games on 3DS are worthy of merit, but if you want us to name just one, Etrian Odyssey 4 is unmissable. Also named Legend of the Titans, the game sees explorers from Tharsis trying to conquer the dungeon of Yggdrasil, discovering the sealed off remains of a fallen empire in the process. You create characters, explore dangerous dungeons, and engage in turn-based combat, making for an RPG and 3DS classic that will totally get its hooks in ya. Modern port like the first three, maybe? Look, I know that we try to have one per franchise in these rankings just for variety's sake really, and I know someone in the comments is going to push their glasses up their nose and say, actually, Persona and Shin Megami Tensei are the same franchise. You're not wrong, of course, but Devil Survivor and Persona are two different branches, much like Monster Hunter versus Monster Hunter Stories. SMT Devil Survivor 2 follows the predecessor's formula of 7 days to form bonds and choose factions, as Japan is under siege from both otherworldly monsters and natural disasters. The version we're choosing though is Record Breaker, which introduces a new potential arc for players that attempts to give everyone a happy ending. In an SMT game, hey, I guess choices are hard, why shouldn't everyone be happy? Street Fighter IV doesn't get the credit it rightly deserves for reigniting the fighting game genre for casual fans. Naturally then, Capcom were going to try and port the game to one of the most successful handhelds of the time, with Super Street Fighter IV 3D Edition launching on the 3DS in 2011. This version could have been a total disaster, but it turned out to be one of the best handheld fighting games of all time. Essentially a straight port of the home console release but catered to casual 3DS players, Super Street Fighter IV uses the touchscreen to allow players to select certain special actions, negating the more complicated inputs, kinda like how they just did with Street Fighter VI. There's still some execution required though, making it a good gateway between casual and enthusiast fighting game players. It might seem a bit far-fetched today given how incredibly successful the series has become on home consoles and PC, but for a good while the Monster Hunter series was pretty much stuck in handheld jail. They were incredibly successful of course, but even though it started life on the PS2, it only really gained massive traction as a handheld game, and the best example of that era is Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. Originally released as just Monster Hunter 4, obviously, Ultimate took the kill, carve, upgrade, repeat cycle and threw a mountain of additional content at it, including new weapon types, new locales, and perhaps most importantly, over 20 new monsters to have a scrap with. When you consider a new narrative to follow too, you've got everything you need for the next 100 plus hours of sitting on the toilet. Not to harp too much on the visual novel point, but the DS and its successor certainly found a niche genre to make its own. They are pretty much the best platforms for these kinds of games ever, really. Two screens lends themselves well to games packed with characters and info dumps. If you want the best of the genre on 3DS though, look no further than Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward. The second game in the Zero Escape series, players control Sigma, someone who's been abducted alongside 8 others to compete in another version of the nonary game. Unlike last time, which was on a cruise ship, a lot of that going around in this list, Virtue's Last Reward is about escaping a warehouse, interacting with the environment and characters in separate phases to do so. Brilliant, full of twists, and kind of demented, it is the perfect visual novel. New Super Mario Bros. 2 still feels like you're right in the middle of a tribute to the past and present. Taking the basic platforming elements of a Mario title in some pretty fun new directions, New Super Mario Bros. 2 proved that Nintendo could honour their past glories in a game with a lot of new bells and whistles that actually mean something to players. That's fair to say that it isn't exactly the most essential Mario game ever, but most essentially, it's very good fun. Bright and chaotic as all hell would be two good ways to describe New Super Mario Bros. 2. It's also just a wild adventure for Mario and Luigi that will appeal to gamers of all ages. That's honestly way more than okay when the end result is such unabashed instant joy. Nothing about Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D not featuring Funky Kong is particularly groundbreaking, but it's nonetheless impressive to see this game so fully realised on the 3DS and for being such a love letter to fans. Longtime fans of the series will definitely be pleased with everything they find here. However, those who play a Donkey Kong Country game for the first time with Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D will find that no prior experience is required. Now granted, this game is tough as nails and the hardcore mode is for the sickos, but it's a breeze to pick up and start playing. Donkey Konky Kunky Redunky 3 Donkey never forgets to be enjoyable, even as some of the more difficult moments can drive you close to or even beyond the point of banana fever. 3D Gunstar Heroes came from a proud and successful lineage, as Gunstar Heroes has been a jewel in the Sega crown for quite some time. Time they remember that though. The game is at its core a run and gun, with a group of heroes known as the Gunstars in their effort to stop an evil empire from taking over the world. It's the sort of game that challenges and delights you from the first few moments onward. The difficulty is manageable, and that's good because it's easy to get overwhelmed by the beautiful graphics, character sprites, and backgrounds. 3D Gunstar Heroes powerfully recreates the Genesis favourite for the 3DS with a decidedly impressive remaster that doesn't lose sight of what makes this game so enduringly beloved. Make another one. I mean, this is a mainline SMT game. It's another branch of the same tree. You know what they say, our own rules are made to be adapted slightly. With great characters, a reliable and enjoyable combat system, and a massive world brilliantly brought to strong graphical life, Shin Megami Tensei 4 is another reason why this franchise is a juggernaut in the 21st century. Of course, the game isn't as sprawling or open to exploration as Shin Megami Tensei titles for more powerful consoles, yet you are likely to be impressed with everything this game still brings to the table. You're going to get lost in the complex narrative and monster collecting / fusion possibilities for quite a long time. Shin Megami Tensei 4 embraces the then present 3DS and what it could do, without forgetting what people like about these groundbreaking games that also tend to be a bit too weird for about 90% of people. Still hasn't been ported at all. You know this one? No ports. The WarioWare series became a hit for emphasizing weirdness and easily accessible fun in the form of dozens and dozens of often pretty surreal microgames. There's not much of a point to playing these games, but once you pick up something like WarioWare Gold, you'll instantly see why this game in particular is considered one of the true fan favorites of the 3DS. WarioWare Gold features everyone's favorite hateful little Mario-themed malcontent hosting a gaming tournament with the very apparent intention of keeping the prize money for himself. It's ultimately up to you to move through this basic thread by playing the many odd little games that perfectly utilize the amazing gimmicks of the 3DS. More than 1,000 micro games were created for the series up to this point, and you can play upwards of 300 of them in WarioWare Gold. What a dream. The sequel to the chart topper from our DS list, go watch that, isn't quite as good, but it's still one of the best games on the 3DS. As painful as it may be, you must give Nintendo credit for using their new consoles to do interesting things with most of their major properties. I mean, Donkey Kong plus Teardown is a pretty good combination on the Switch too, right? Mario and Luigi Dream Team proves that the company is particularly willing to do strange and often delightful things with their most famous character. As you begin to play through, you'll find a wide range of surprises and unique ideas, creating something that is familiar yet very fresh at the same time. Just keep in mind that you're in for one of the longest Mario games on record. The game never stops showing off its sense of humour or looking for new ways to spin your expectations. Shovel Knight looks and plays beautifully on the Nintendo 3DS. It is one of the greatest indie games of all time, after all. Combining beautiful sprite graphics and surprisingly lush background with simple platform mechanics that lead to a truly rich, challenging playing experience, Shovel Knight reminds you of history in the best possible way. Shovel Knight is a love letter to a formidable era, and it's something of a classic itself as we barrel through the 2020s, but it's also the kind of fun that is very much centred in modern expectations. Also, jumping on things in games, yeah, always good. Combine that with your childhood memories of using a spade on a beach, and you have quite the childhood flashback in about a million ways here. Don't worry about the million spin-offs of this either. Mario Kart 7 continued the trend of Nintendo staying the course with their flagship kart racing series, while simultaneously making tweaks and additions, keeping the drama and devastation of some bastard sticking a blue shell up your arse in the final stretch intact. Rachel, if you're watching this, I love you, but I don't forgive you. New karts and characters, new tracks, and gently refined gameplay all serve to create a perfect experience on the 3DS. If you know and like Mario Kart already, this 7th entry in the franchise is going to be mostly more of the same in a way that avoids feeling stale. It helps that this game added fun features like the ability to drive underwater. Gliders were also added to the proceedings, and that's just 2 examples of how Mario Kart 7 became a beloved entry in its own right and a standout for the Nintendo 3DS. While Metroid Samus Returns is effectively a remake of the Game Boy fan favourite Metroid 2 Return of Samus, just a few minutes of playing is going to make it abundantly clear that this is so much more than a fresh coat of paint. Everything about that groundbreaking 1991 sequel has been revamped and refreshed, without taking anything away from the influential elements of the series that makes any entry a ton of fun, no matter how many times you get extremely lost. Samus Returns livens up your expectations with melee counterattacks and being able to aim as you please from any possible angle. You're also probably going to be impressed, even now, with just how stunning Samus Returns is with its backgrounds and character designs, and also that this was the developer's first stab at Metroid before they resurrected Dread. It also came out after Breath of the Wild. Just a neat little bit of info I enjoy. Someone's fingers just started throbbing. Kid Icarus Uprising had to be a pretty sweet release for fans of the original Kid Icarus on the NES, who had been starving for years. Uprising takes full advantage of the stereoscopic 3D power of the 3DS to create something that's as fun to play as it is visually striking and again a pain on your fingers. The inherent challenge of the original Kid Icarus, one of the most notoriously difficult NES games ever made, hasn't been forgotten here either. You should expect a much more manageable degree of challenge here, but also a game that is almost ludicrously fast-paced at times. You're going to be expected to keep up with a lot in Kid Icarus Uprising, but at no point will that ever begin to feel like a chore, a rapid-fire slice of fun that we'd kill to see more of. Bravely Default draws from Square's most famous RPGs, but with a different approach to the story and characters, with a number of modern touches also thrown in for good measure. Quite a lot was expected of this game before release, but Bravely Default not only met those promises for genre fans, but it managed to succeed them with one of the best RPGs on the 3DS. Bravely Default weaves an engaging story with appealing and diverse characters, but the game also features elements like Brave Points. We won't get too deeply into the game's unique interactions and battle system traits, we'll just say it's simple yet surprisingly complex, giving Bravely Default the benefit of being more than just a throwback. You don't have to be brave to enjoy this brilliant RPG, you just have to not go outside for a while. The Nintendo 3DS got 2 very good Luigi's Mansion games, including a remake of the GameCube original that's still fondly remembered today. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is the better of the 2, offering what was then the best Luigi's Mansion game yet released and proving the 3DS could deliver full-fat sequels to your console favourites. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon first succeeds by sticking to the best things about the first game and its remake, then it just does them better. You're going to get more places to explore, more refined gameplay, and a lot of secrets to uncover across a surprisingly deep game. Ye old vacuuming mechanics remain immensely satisfying as you guide Luigi in his ghost-busting adventures. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is a really good time, and it says a lot about the next 7 games that this one isn't higher. The Fire Emblem franchise will, now at least, always have a vast and dedicated fanbase. Fire Emblem Awakening for the Nintendo 3DS is one of the big reasons why. These games eventually shifted from being a niche franchise to one with wider appeal, and Awakening proved to be a significant step in that direction. The graphics and art style didn't hurt, but really, Awakening didn't stray too far from the complex battle system and massive storyline that had always been a part of these releases. So, what made this game a step in a different, more mainstream direction? Perhaps it's simply that systems like the 3DS could finally open up the true potential of this elaborate, endlessly replayable strategy game classic. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have 100 hours to spend. Definitely not a lot of that on save scumming. No sir, no. Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King is one of the best RPG releases since the turn of the millennium, and remains just as fresh and vital here as it originally did on the PS2. A visually sumptuous game with a story and main quest that will keep you busy for a few dozen hours, Dragon Quest VIII is an epic in every imaginable sense. Taking the role of the hero, your journey, including side quests, can cover a remarkable variety of lands and worlds, encountering creatures, monsters, eccentric characters, and everything else you might expect from one of the biggest and most beloved RPG franchises of all time. Even with the relatively straightforward combat system, the game has so much to do, see and experience that you're never going to get bored, especially with how many quality of life updates this version has. Any of the best Kirby games combine the essential mechanics of the series with a clever, often quite silly twist. Kirby Planet Robobot not only features what might be the absolute darkest story in the entire series, but also throws in some new fun additions, such as the ability for Kirby to pilot a mech. Can you imagine being a war veteran who's now a tutor in a pilot school and a pink blob strolls up to you? You can also count on Kirby Planet Robobot to offer a good sense of variety to not only the stage designs and bosses, but also in terms of the different genres represented. There's some vehicle stages that are not only a good break from the main thread of Planet Robobot, but also show off the visual cleverness. Again, it is a dark plot, but sadly nothing that's quite as dark as Robocop. No Kirby getting shot in the balls here, or ball? Nintendo, you cowards. Animal Crossing New Leaf is yet another Animal Crossing game that wins for its cute designs and potentially endless opportunities to craft a unique world that looks awful, but hey, you spent all this time on it, so you may as well just double down, yeah? Tasking you with the challenges of being the mayor of the town you've just arrived at, you're going to be able to build, customize and collect for a long old time. There's a lot to do, and as is the case with Animal Crossing in general, a lot of friendly and sometimes strange faces to meet. This is one of the greatest Nintendo 3DS games ever made, for how many hours will suddenly just disappear. Even as it has been overshadowed by New Horizons on the Switch, and Switch 2, New Leaf still has its own energy and specifics that make it a standalone masterpiece of its type. Exploring the distant shores of the Alola region, both Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon certainly set you up in a vast and beautiful world in which to collect and build up your Pokemon. Sun and Moon were fairly standard entries in the long-running franchise on a few fronts, but did do a few cool things. Z moves and more realistic character models did help, but Ultra Sun and Moon were the updated re-release that fixed the whole bunch. The new Pokemon are fun to discover, collect and train, and either of these games make that pretty fun to work on. With your fully customizable character, you can take on everything that Alola has to offer, and to be sure, this pair of 3DS games have a lot to do, especially in their Ultra versions. Thanks to their lovely, sumptuous visuals and surprisingly captivating story, Pokemon Sun and Moon are two of the best Pokemon games you'll ever play, but there are so many to choose from on the 3DS that it's more than fine if you want to put something like X and Y here instead. Don't shout, please. Please. It's hard to believe more than a decade has passed since the release of Super Mario 3D Land, the predecessor to Super Mario 3D World on the Wii U. It's actually 15 years this November. Whew, everything you know will turn to sand. The game had to cover a lot of ground. Players were expecting a handheld 3D platformer that would combine the fundamentals of Mario platforming with the potential of not only the 3DS itself, but how a game as unique as this would function in a world of handheld 3D gaming. As it turned out, no one needed to worry at all, as we got one of the best Mario games of the past quarter century. Rather than making you want to lie down for about 2 to 4 hours, Super Mario 3D Land uses the 3D side of things intelligently and in ways that only serve to make the traditional Mario experience feel fresh and exciting once more. It is often overlooked when it comes to talking about the best Mario games of the last however many years, but you know in your heart of hearts that you've missed the sight of Mario in a Tanuki suit. But make sure you don't miss our top pick for the best 3DS game of all time. While our list of the best 3DS games covers some of the greatest titles Nintendo has ever released, The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds may just be in a category all on its own. That's only marginally hyperbolic. Us hyperbolic? How bloody dare you, as we're talking about a legitimate contender in some hearts for the best Zelda game ever made. As good as the other 3DS games are, A Link Between Worlds is better, and not by a small amount either. By simply offering Link's transformation ability to players, A Link Between Worlds suddenly becomes an experience you can't have anywhere else, because this isn't just some surface level fun. The very nature by which you engage dungeons and other characters has undergone a radical transformation, one which is still rooted beautifully and vitally in the traditions of a perfect Zelda game. It is remarkable just how enjoyable this game is, making an argument in its own way that the best video games ever made are truly art on their own complex terms, and also I always enjoy the rabbit guy. Outro gang, those were the best 3DS games ever made of all time according to us. What should be our next 50 best? 50 next? Yeah, drop the console down below you want us to do and just say next, and we'll see if we get around to it. I've been JB of Culture Vultures, been good to have you, and I'll catch you when I catch you. You better start running.